Welcome to another episode of the show that focuses on African leadership and development. This week, we're talking trade, and we host the Executive Director of the International Trade Center, Arancha González. We get your views on the issues, and as always, we have Africa's top 10. You're watching the Africa Leadership Dialogues. I'm Julie Gishuru. How can we enhance trade across Africa to ensure development across different nations, regions, communities? That's the big question tonight on the Africa Leadership Dialogues. We host Arancha González, the Executive Director of the International Trade Center. The International Trade Center is a joint agency of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development and the World Trade Organization. Prior to this, from 2005 to 2013, Arancha González served as the Chief of Staff to WTO Director-General Pascal Lamy. During her tenure at the WTO, she played an active role in launching the WTO's Aid for Trade initiative and served as Lamy's representative at the G20. Ms. González has extensive knowledge about international trade and economics, coupled with broad experience in trade and development matters in the public and private sectors, as well as in management at multilateral organizations. Let's get her views on the issues. Arancha, thank you so much for finding time to be on the Africa Leadership Dialogues. Now let's focus on Africa and trade. And I think the biggest gap we seem to have right now on the continent is capacity and scaling up, particularly when it comes to adding value. We are busy exporting raw materials. We're losing out on incredible opportunities. What must we do to transform the current situation?
Well, it's about adding more value to the assets that the African continent has, starting with the biggest asset called agriculture. I was recently in a West African country. It's a country the size of France. It has water and land in abundance, but there are only 15 tractors in this huge country. And this country imports essentially its entire food bill. So it can't be that this country cannot use its assets and leverage those assets. So it's about leveraging the assets that you have. It's value added. And this, Julie, has a lot to do with supporting small and medium enterprises, supporting micro farmers, supporting informal producers, because they are the backbone of many of our economies. They are SMEs in any country, anywhere in the world, are more than 90% of the economic tissue of that country. So if we want to do more value added, it's by focusing on tapping on the growth potential that small and medium enterprises and micro entrepreneurs have in this continent.
So let me ask the difficult question. An African country the size of France, 15 tractors, what does that say about leadership? And what can organizations like ITC do to change the priorities of leadership? Well,
it so happens that I have enormous respect for the leadership of that country, but it's just that the priorities are so enormous that you don't know where to start from. This is why the most important thing is get your planning right. Start by setting your priorities. And I know that some leaders tell me, but everything is a priority in my country. I need to fix education. I need to fix healthcare. I need to fix infrastructure, energy. I need to fix the schools. So first, proper planning. If you get proper planning, then you are already 50% in the road to success. And in particular, in agriculture, one problem we've had for many, many years is that we have considered that agriculture was not cool. Agriculture was old-fashioned. And I am of the view that investing in agriculture will help us a lot in reducing poverty and in tapping into the growth potential. There are 1 billion people in this world that live with less than $1 a day. I don't know how much this is in Kenyan shillings, but it's very little. And 70% of these people are in rural areas. And 60% of these people are women. So if we fix agriculture, if we innovate in agriculture, if we mechanize agriculture, if we transform agriculture from livelihood into industrial agriculture, then we are providing good quality jobs that are going to increase the income for these people from $1 to 5 to 10 to 15, and that is going to give an opportunity to the thousands, the millions of women in the rural areas.
Right. And the good news is that it's happening. Countries like Nigeria and Ethiopia are transforming the situation on the ground. Slowly by slowly, we're seeing a change. We hope it can happen faster. Let's go to that now. In terms of the on-the-ground projects, for instance, that ITC is managing, one of them is She Trades, another is e-commerce, which I believe has been piloted in Morocco. Take us through what's actually being done to start to build capacity, to build knowledge and create opportunities for people on the ground.
Let's start with She Trades. And for those of us who are watching us, She Trades is an initiative that we have launched, International Trade Center, an agency of the United Nations, to connect 1 million women to markets by 2020. And, some people are still asking me the question, I got a question on my Twitter feed recently saying, what's all this fuss about women? The reality is that if we put money in the pockets of the women, the spending pattern of a woman is different. 90% of what she spends goes back to the family and community. 40% in the case of the men. Nothing against the men, but the spending pattern is different. So we know that if we give her this $1, she's going to spend 90 cents in feeding the children, in sending them to school, in ensuring health care, faster route to reduce poverty. So we want, from a social point of view, we want to put more money into the hands of women. But from an economic point of view, what economy is it that leaves half of its assets sitting idle? It can't be. So even if you don't believe in rights of women, even if you don't believe in human rights, which is a bit bizarre, but nevertheless, you still should care about the economy. You should care about making your economy stronger, more resilient. And this is why we want She Trades. So 1 million women to markets by 2020, working on 7 areas. It goes from having the right trade policies, to collecting the right trade data, to making sure we use public procurement, the state purchasing, to purchase from more women entrepreneurs, to make sure that businesses, when they buy with, this idea they can do good and do business at the same time, and focusing on financial inclusion. This is what we are doing here in Kenya, partnering with Barclays Bank, a bank that has now has created a fund of $50 million US, money shillings. I don't remember the exact amount, but it's quite a substantive amount in credits for women entrepreneurs. They are going to be partnering with the International Trade Center to make sure that the woman that knocks at the door of Barclays Bank is a woman that Barclays Bank is ready to give credit to. Because this woman is a real entrepreneur. She has already the skills to be part of international trade or regional trade. She can be in the market.
That is very exciting to see the private sector stepping up and saying we have a role to play here. It makes sense socially, it makes sense for the community, but it also makes business sense, which is incredible. Tell us about some of the projects that have already started in this region.
So let's talk about Kenya, since we are in Kenya. In this country, we have been working for over 3 years now with 5 big food transforming companies, 5 food processors. They do mangoes, processed mangoes. They do spices. They do avocados. What we've been working on with them is help them move up the value chain, add value to these agricultural products to capture better prices. Today, I saw what one of these companies has done in these 3 years. It used to export mangoes. It now exports dried mangoes, packaged with a nice label. It sends them to the United Arab Emirates, one of the most difficult countries to export in terms of the high quality standards they have for food.
Stay with the Africa Leadership Dialogues.
Let's look at technology for a moment. And technology, first and foremost, has opened up the world in terms of trade. Now we are buying and selling across borders. In many ways, it's ahead of policy in many countries. But, there are also risks associated with that. There are opportunities associated with that. You have an e-commerce program that you've piloted. Take us through that.
Well, e-commerce is a huge tool to disintermediate, to jump over your intermediaries that in a way are capturing a big part of the value that you generate with your products or your services. Because we must also remember, Julie, that 2/3 of international trade is trade in services.
2/3?
It's trade in services.
That's incredible.
Is finance, is logistics, is distribution, is environmental services, tourism, hospitality, and the list goes on. It's big. 2/3 of our economies are made of services. So we have to also think that, and you can do a lot of online services, but there are obvious challenges with going online. Your payment systems. Many countries don't have online payment systems. Logistics. It's okay to order your goods online, but the goods still have to travel to your place, right? If you make a small orders, if I'm sitting in Geneva, Switzerland, and I order small package of dried mangoes from the company here in Kenya, how much is it going to cost the company to ship this package of mangoes to Geneva? 3, consumer protection. How can we make sure that the goods that are sold on the internet are up to standards of quality, of health, of safety that are required in the market? So all of this is the world of, let's say, the challenges that need to be fixed. This is why one of the programs that we have recently launched and that we are piloting in a number of countries, including Rwanda in the East African community, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Senegal, in Morocco, is working on improving all these, let's say, constraints, challenges that prevent the smaller actors from accessing customers through the internet, through e-commerce platforms. It's the future.
It's a very exciting time, and for Africa, with our youth bulge and with our countries being more and more democratized, we seem to be moving forward in terms of governance, albeit maybe not as fast as we would want. We do have some countries that we're leaving behind. However, the youth bulge, we have a growing middle class population. That means our consumers are growing, our consumer power is growing. What does this mean in terms of where Africa sits on the global scene?
Oh, Africa is the continent where the largest untapped potentials exist in so many areas. We've just discussed agriculture, but urbanization, infrastructures, value chain development. This is the country that is less, let's say, value chained, that process less its inputs, where the fragmentation of production, like you do a one piece and you send it to me and I do another piece and I send it to the other guy and he does another piece and then we sell it to the consumer. This is the continent where value chains are less developed in the world. So this is the continent which has the largest amount of arable land that has not been tapped into. This is the continent that has the largest amount of, that has enormous amount of water. So assets are there. The assets are there. The question is now seriously upping the game to use these assets to generate greater quality growth, which is what will make the difference between having a youth dividend or having a time bomb sitting under your door.
And I think you've opened the door to my next question, which was, we hope and we are in many ways trying to tap that potential. If we do not adequately tap that potential, what are the risks?
Well, the risks are huge, and we have seen some of these risks in other parts of the world when the youth just simply explode, when they say, we are tired, that's it, we want this no more. We can't accept to be highly educated, but be underemployed or unemployed. We don't like to be just in the informal sector. We don't just want to have many jobs, if at all. So the risks are very big. If I look at this continent and I look at other continents in this world and I look at terrorism, for example, that is feeding a lot of its networks on very disenfranchised youth that don't have today a decent income to earn, except if they join a terrorist network, if they join a criminal network, if they join some sort of illicit activity network. So we have to pay a lot of attention to this youth dimension. I had a chance during the UNCTAD ministerial to have a great dialogue with the youth forum that was taking place in parallel with the conference. It's very refreshing when one sits with this youth and listens to what they have to say. They have amazing expectations, but we have to make sure that we don't frustrate those expectations.
We have to deliver. We have to deliver. Looking at Africa now, and you've been previously, before ITC, you were with the World Trade Organization. You have vast experience in these matters. What would you advise African leaders in terms of what capacity do they need to build, or what characteristics must they embody to ensure that they are adequately representing their nations, their regions, and the continent?
Well, I think that three ingredients are necessary to be a good leader. And thus is valid in Africa as it is valid in anywhere else, including in the country that I know best, that is my own, Spain. You need to have the ability to plan properly. You need to plan. You can't let things happen organically or not happen because you've not planned in advance. Planning is very important. Coherence at home, coordinating all the different pieces of this big jigsaw that is your public policies. You making sure that your agricultural policies fit with your trade policies, with the infrastructure, with the finance, with the women, with the youth, and it goes on. Proper planning. 2, true partnerships. Governments in this continent, like anywhere else in the world, will not have enough resources to face the huge challenges of transforming the economies in the 21st century. So strong partnerships with the private sector, with civil society, with international organizations, to make sure that we blend all these resources that are available out there and make sure that they contribute to transforming our economies. 3 is accountability, monitoring, giving people a sense that you tell them what is happening, what has happened, and what still needs to be done, so that you bring them with them. You have to bring people with you. You can't, in the 21st century, govern if you don't bring people with you.
Speaking earlier this week at UNCTAD, the President of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, said his feeling was very much that there was no level playing field, is basically what he was saying. He was referring to the UN systems, and I think in many ways, the way our world bodies operate. What are your observations on that? Would you say that Africa is disadvantaged in some spaces? And if not, what's your advice to those who feel it is? And if it is, what do we need to do to change the situation?
Well, I think the United Nations today does not represent the world of today. The United Nations, in its institutional system, was invented in the last century. It was the result of a Cold War. It was the result of winners and losers in the Second World War. And it does not take into account the huge transformation in this world that has happened since. And this is what President Kenyatta was saying. He said, I don't think the Security Council of the United Nations represents the world of the 21st century. And I very much agree with him on that. But we have to be careful that when we refer to the United Nations, we don't give citizens the impression that it's the thousands of men and women that are fighting to reduce poverty, that are risking their lives to feed poor refugees that are now today in places like South Sudan, like Somalia, like Syria, like Afghanistan, Iraq.
Doing life transformational work.
That's right.
Critical.
So we have to be very careful to differentiate the structures of the United Nations that are decided by the members of the United Nations. And frankly, they are not in agreement for the reforms that need to be undertaken.
So some transformation at that structural level does need to happen.
Absolutely, yes. 100% in agreement with President Kenyatta. But let's distinguish this from the thousands of men and women, among which I count myself modestly, who are fighting every day to make this world a little bit more inclusive, and that is fighting every day to reduce poverty and assist those that are most dispossessed in our world.
Before I ask you to send a message to many Africans watching, the world is changing so fast. The sense is that walls are coming up. Walls that had come down seem now to be coming up again. With the exit of Britain from the European Union, what does that mean for the world? What does it mean for Africa? We are watching an American election, not very sure how it's going to go and whether that will mean more walls are going up or coming down. What are your thoughts on what the future holds for both Africa and the world?
No, I think we are, I would agree with you, Julie, that we're going through a tremendous amount of instability in this world. This instability that has several causes, has several root causes. And in my view, the best thing we can do is try to address these root causes of the huge fragility and conflict that we're seeing in the world, both in the north and in the south, both in the east and in the west. It has different manifestations, but we are seeing wars, we're seeing conflicts, we are seeing hunger, we are seeing disease, we are seeing populist movements taking a huge space into public and political life in many countries. We are seeing lots of extremist positions, very inward-looking policies, mine for me and for the rest I don't care. So we have to fight the root causes, and I think we have to do a better job at explaining to the citizens the huge transformations in our economies, in our societies that are happening. We have to make sure we decode this. Instead of telling people there is this whole world called globalization out there that is here to haunt you, but I'm going to defend you, which is a very traditional way of governing.
It's an easy message of fear.
That's right. Instead of doing that, I think we can tell citizens this is a world, this 21st century is a world of amazing transformation. Some are going to create losers, and we have to take care of the losers. We also have winners, and we have to make sure that the benefits between winners and losers are not disproportionately skewed in favor of the winners. Right. That we also take all of these people, again, that are living with less than $1 a day, that were middle classes yesterday and today find themselves poor, living in shelters. So we have to do a better job of explaining to citizens these huge transformations and then put in place mechanisms for national and international cooperation that are going to make us stronger in resisting these enormous pressures that we are seeing, again, everywhere in the world.
Thank you so much, Arancha. At this point, I'll ask you to look into the camera. Just deliver a message to the many, many Africans watching this show. We are known in many ways for hard work, for passion. How can we use our energies to positively transform the continent?
I would tell every African man and every African woman, let's not forget the women, and every African youth that the future is yours to take. Don't let others take it for you. Take it yourself. Take command of the future of this continent. I have traveled in this continent, north, south, east, west. I know the future is there. Don't let anybody steal it from you. Work for it.
Work for it. The future is yours. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie.
As always, we end with words of incredible wisdom. Our African proverb this week goes, "You must attend to your business with the vendor in the market and not to the noise of the market." There is so much to do. We must plan, we must be strategic, and then we must execute. Let's not be carried away by the noise. Let's focus on the vendor. Blessings to you, and blessings